So my name is Rich Fowler. I am part of the Progressus Advanced Projects partner team, and we have with us our European team from Progressus Europe, Stefan and Aski. They'll introduce themselves as we get going. Today we are talking and learning about the extension for Dynamics 365 Business Central, and specifically as we care about Progressus for both intercompany master data management. And that's a mouthful, and it may be abbreviated 2 or 3 times. So we'll let Stefan and Aski explain the reason for the naming and why it's important to you and your business as you push and continue your Dynamics 365 Business Central practice. So let me introduce the General Manager of Progressus Europe. Welcome in, Stefan Nielsen.
Thank you very much, Rich. Yes, well, this slide is already presented then. As you can see, we put master into brackets. I think in the end of this presentation, I do believe that you will understand why you actually do it like that. I could also add it's available, the app is available on App Source, so you can download it at any time and after this session, because there will also be links in this presentation that will be sent out to recordings, so you can easily watch recordings and see how it's set up. Rich already introduced us. We are Progressus Europe. We are Progressus in Europe. So we distribute Progressus in Europe. We build up a European network and we do the European localizations, etc. But we also do sometimes some apps. Some apps are dedicated for Progressus. Others are a little bit more general. Works very nicely with Progressus, but could also work with Business Central. And those apps are actually published under another name, that's Prime. So that's why you're going to see Prime a little bit in this presentation, but hey, we are the same guys. It's just another name on the publisher. So focus of today, intercompany master data management. And there are 3 things I would like you to remember after this session. When anyone asks you, that was a tricky name, what was it all about? And then you should be able to say, it's about transfer of any data between any companies within or between an environment. Because that's it, that's what it's all about. And now, as we can do that, we can also process transactional data between companies working as one in an integrated intercompany process. And this is actually quite unique. There are not that many solutions, if any, for Business Central that can do this. I'm not saying that this is the perfect solution for all end users in the world. I'm just saying what we do, very few others can do. What others do, most of them what they do, we can do. So when I say that, what do I mean? Yeah, traditional master data management is very much about having a master company transferring data into other companies. It's a one-way synchronization of data. It could also be virtual companies set up within one company. I think that's a solution that is very much used in North America and US. We don't see it that much in Europe, but we can see a number of solutions having this kind of solution with virtual companies within one company. Now, and as I explained, our solution is more many-to-many, any data between any company. When I say company, I mean a Business Central company. And a Business Central company, and this is just for, I don't know, not to confuse people, to make it clear, I had a couple of discussions last week and I realized that, this might be important to say. When we talk about companies, it's the Business Central companies that you set up, and they are all different from each other, etc. Conceptually different than if you set up virtual companies within one of these companies. So a Business Central company, that's what we are talking about, but we don't really care about in which environment the companies are in. So they can be different environments, US, Canada, UK, Germany, whatever. And since we can do that, as I said before, we can also process transactional data between companies. And this illustrates which very soon will be presented as an intercompany project process with Progressus. And I think that's a little bit of the topic. Although we have this general thing we can do with the solution, it's also very much specific for Progressus and how we can actually support intercompany projects. And that's where all of this started, because we realized that there are many companies in Europe, absolutely the same in US, who, they consider the resources to be a global asset. They have several different legal entities, companies. People are employed in these different companies, but they don't care in which project the resources are working. They just want to have them utilized. So that's the scope where we started, and to be able to provide all of that, we had to have this master data and the data in the company and environment. So in this example now with transactional data, let's assume that we have a company, it's a group, so it's a number of companies, and we have this company A, and they closed a project with a client. So they set up their client on the project, the client project, and they start allocate resources. Now they realize that they need some resources, skills, capabilities, availability. They're actually employed in another company. They are in company B and company C. So what they do is they create automatically an intercompany project in company B and C, where the resources are allocated to the project in company A. Now these resources that are actually working in company B and C, they time entry. And normally time entries are approved in the company where you work, etc. But in this case, the project is owned, the client project, by company A. So the time entries will flow over to company A for approval by the product manager. Approve, reject, and then it will fly back again. The beauty with this is that we will create project entries as soon as the time entries are improved in company A, meaning we can immediately invoice the client. And later on, company B and company C, well, they will process their intercompany invoices, according to internal guidelines and framework. So this is an example of how we can process transactional data. And Aske, if you are ready, I thought I'm going to leave this over to you to show a little bit how it works. And although it looks, it just happens magically. Obviously there are some settings behind, and we will have a short look at what's happening behind. Okay?
Thank you, Stefan. And I'll add something, of course, that this will, of course, open up for a number of questions. What is happening? What are the possibilities? Would it be possible to do this or that? If you have any questions, please put them in the chat as we go along, and I will try to incorporate answers to any of these, either during the demo or at the end of the presentation. So don't hold back. Let's hear any questions you have. So what I'll start out with is working in a number of different companies. I've set up 3 different companies in my environment, and they are all each a separate legal entity. So I have in here one company. It is called the Alpha Company. This is one of my companies. I have another company in here, which is my Beta Company. And I have my third company in here, which is my Charlie Company. And unfortunately, they look very much alike because they're all 3 different Business Central companies. But I'll try to make it clear whenever I'm switching from one company to another, which company I am in. And if you want to refer back, there's always a small indicator at the top right corner of the screen saying what company are we currently in. So if we're in Charlie Company, you will see a C in the corner. If we are in Beta Company, we will see a B in the corner, and if we are in the alpha company, we will see a small A in the corner. That should help us keep track of where we are, because we will be switching between the different companies as we move data from one company to another. So starting out, before we dive into this transactional scenario that Stefan outlined, I think we will start with something a bit more simple, just to get warmed up on this. And a simple example of data transfer that we could do with this solution would be maintaining maybe our chart of accounts. So in our alpha company, we have a chart of accounts. This is my chart of accounts, a number of different accounts in here, and this is what we use in this company. The other companies in this company group, they have agreed to align their chart of accounts. They're part of the same company group, and so they want to have their chart of accounts aligned to make it easier to do consolidation across companies at a later point in time. So the scenario we're looking at saying, well, we want an additional account in our chart of account, and let's add a new account to this chart of accounts. So let's add one below sales discounts. We could create a chart of an account called sales rebates. So let's create that one, and we will go in, create a new account. I'll call it 10/20/250, and so that already existed. So it would be, of course, 10/350, and I'll call it sales rebates. And this is my new account. I'll not spend any time on setting it up the right way. It's more than showing that I've created a new account here. It's added to my chart of accounts. And because we have automated this, we have marked this as being an intercompany table, and we have decided that it will be distributed to other companies within the group. If I switch over to my beta company in here, and open my chart of accounts, I should see that I now have a sales rebates account as well. And this happens automatically, no user intervention. So we can set up these automated flows where things just flow between one company or another. And the setup for this is relatively easy. We will not dive into the details of it, but just to show you that we set up different topics for different areas of data, and now I need to be in the right company. So in my alpha company, I've set up different topics of data. You will see here that I have finance data, I have project data, and I have some vendor information. These are the different topics I want to communicate or that I want to distribute to other companies within my group of companies. And my finance data I distribute to all other companies. The same goes for my project data, but my vendor data only goes to a specific other subscriber, in this case my beta company. So I can decide who gets this data. And in the case of my finance data, I have some different tables set up in here. We can see one of them is the GL account. And so this would be something that is then pushed out to all the other companies, and they will uptake the data automatically and integrate it into their data sets. As Stefan mentioned, this works across different companies, but it also works with different environments. So this could be all within maybe a US setup environment, but it could also be between different environments. So it could be that my alpha company was in a US environment, my beta company was in a Canadian environment, and Charlie company might be in a German environment. And so it will work across those boundaries. And that is really a differentiator from other solutions that might allow this, but it would then require you to take out the data in some file format and importing again. We're doing it automatically, directly on the fly, using the power of Azure Cloud and the Azure Service Bus. So this was a simple scenario. Let's go to the more complicated scenario of the transactional data. And it is not complicated from an end user perspective, but we need to keep a bit more in mind when looking at it. So looking at the slide again, what we're looking at first is we're setting up a project. So let's start with that step. We set up a new project. We will set up a project in our alpha company. And our alpha company will be the one that owns the company, the project, and bills an end customer. So I will create a new project with a project wizard. We will call this IC001. It is our first intercompany project. I will call it IC Demo 1. I will add a task template, and this is part of the Progresses project setup where it's very easy to quickly create projects based on templating. So I'll just go through this very quickly to get a project set up for a certain customer, not diving into the details, but in a quick way getting a project up and running. And so I have my IC01 project set up in my alpha company. So in my list of projects, I now have my IC001 project. It is in here. And if I switch over to one of my other companies, let's go to the beta company. Again, keep track of the indicator on the top to know where you are. We will see on our list of projects, there is no InterCompany 001. And so for projects, we have defined that they should not automatically be transferred between different entities. We only want to do this on demand. So in this case, we are setting up the project in the alpha company, and we want to send it over to our beta company in order for somebody in the beta company to work on this project. And this is where the resourcing comes into place. So alpha company creates a project, and we will send it to beta company and potentially Charlie company as well. And there we have employees that can start working on those projects. What I have here is one intercompany project that I created early on. That is the test 001 project. And that I sent over to the beta company earlier on. And we can actually see it from in here, because it should show up as being a company that exists in our beta company list of projects. So we do have it here as well, the test 001 coming out of the alpha company. And this is a true intercompany project that has been moved from the alpha company to the beta company. So with this project being sent from alpha to beta, the next step would be to have somebody working on that project. And that brings us to the next step of our presentation, having resources work across these company boundaries. So we have resources, and they are created in the beta company, and then they work on the project, and their time will go for approval in the alpha company. And so the question is, how do we manage that resources are created in the beta company but need to also exist in the company A for resource allocation purposes and for time tracking? So here we have data going the other way. We start out in the beta company, we have our resources, and we have a list of resources, and let's create a new resource here. And let's call this resource, let's call it Betty. Makes it easy to remember she worked for the beta company. So we call her Beta Betty. And we should assign her to a resource group. She's probably a consultant in this. And we might also want to give her some configuration regarding her timesheets. We will set her up for time reporting. So let's create some timesheets for her. And this should be all we need for having a new resource in here. So we've added Betty to the list of resources in the beta company. And same way we tried to send a project from the alpha company to the beta company, we'll now send a resource from the beta company to the alpha company. And we do it the same way with the send to company. And in this case, we will send it to the alpha company. And so it was sent to one other company. Again, we could send it to multiple other companies. And that's part of this. Everybody can communicate with everybody else. It's not necessarily one master company that distributes data out. It can go in a network or a mesh of companies back and forth. So switching over to our alpha company, looking at our list of resources, we now have Betty. Beta Betty is in this company. And we should be able to track some time for Betty in the beta company when she works on the project. It'll come into the alpha company, and in the alpha company we will approve the time because the project itself is owned by the alpha company. So again, switching back to beta company, I will open up a timesheet for Betty, and I will fill in some time where she works on our project, and I needed some setup on Betty, I realize. Not a problem. I can of course make changes, and any changes I make to Betty in here will also flow. So I need a general posting, product posting group. Let's put that in here, and we should then be able to do some time reporting on her. Let's see, timesheet entry. I open up a timesheet. I select our intercompany project. I select the task she worked on. It was development. And let's say she worked for 2 hours on Monday, 3 hours on Tuesday. And we're probably good to go at this point and can submit the timesheet. She would probably have other work to do in her own company. We are not regarding this at this point in time, just trying to keep it simple. So I submit the timesheet, and then this time goes for approval automatically in the alpha company. So switching back to our alpha company, I should be able to go into time approval. And in here, we will see that I now have time to approve on my test 1 project, 5 hours of work. These were the 2 entries I just created, and I can approve all of them. And with that, they are now part of the project that I have in here, our test 001, meaning I can open this up and get an invoice suggestion. What should we bill the customer? And it should show my hours. It's not coming through yet. Let's open up the project and see what mistake I made now. So I do see I have my time on here. I have my time as well. And I probably forgot to say that this was a chargeable project. So then of course it does not become available for invoicing. I'll make it chargeable, go back out, open up our invoice suggestion, and not yet. I do see an approved amount for invoicing. This is not really my day, is it?
It's a shitty day.
It is. It sure is. Worst presentation
We've all had
ever.
those days. It's okay. I know the support team that's on the call from our side is cheering because they have sometimes the same day, so don't feel bad.
No. So for some reason, invoicing doesn't work in this case. It's not really related to the intercompany process. The time moved over, it was approved, and it got onto the project. That it happens to be not chargeable to a customer, well, things happen. Of course, on the other side, in our beta company, that time also needs to be approved. So similarly, we will have entries, and now, of course, I'm not the approver of that time. That is the other project manager, so I would need to log in as the line manager for Betty to approve her time. And in that case, I would approve it, and we could then charge the alpha company for that time at a later point in time if there's an intercompany process as well. So I think that more or less concludes my not so nice demo, and I'll hand back to Stefan.
Thank you. And am I a presenter now? Rich, could you please?
You are about to be. Give it 2 seconds to get there.
Can you see my screen?
And we do.
Super. Now, question then, how to install and set up. As I said, it's available on Microsoft App Source. So when you receive these slides, you will have the link to App Source. Just download and you know, from the marketplace. If you want to have these special features for intercompany project processing for progressors, contact us, because you need an PTE app installed in the environment. So Rich, that's for us to discuss and to agree where to have it, well, in your partner portal, for instance, for download. Now, once that is installed, there are documentation and video instructions on our online docs portal. So here, for the more technical people, you can read more about the design details in here. For more consulting, wondering how to do this, you have a walkthrough. You have lots of recordings in here that show you how do I set up the companies, how do I create a topic, which is the data that should be transferred between different companies. How do I set up when this should happen, instantly or manual process, etc. So there is a number of very nice video recordings to be used. And as a bonus, in the end here, you also have a video recording showing the progressors intercompany product process where we a little bit failed today, but you actually have it recorded here, available on YouTube. That's our fallback plan, Rich, for you to distribute.
Awesome.
Okay. A few things that are good to know, Aske, if you could just
Absolutely.
give it a little bit.
And so this is a tool to move data between companies. This is really the foundation of it. And again, different companies in the same environment, companies between environments, this is what it does. And it is really fast to set up for simple scenarios. It is really fast to set up for some of these preset scenarios like the project scenario that I showed today. We've made it very flexible and open to be adapted for customer needs. So it is really in all areas something where if there is a specific customer need, it can be adapted either via setup or a small amount of code. We have not locked anything down and say you cannot do this. Very open-ended. We do not have all the final actions on every page for sending the data on demand. So you see that I opened up in resources, said send to another company. If you have a customer saying we would like to send some special data, then that might not be an area where we've added an action already for you to press and say send to another company. But we do supply some template code that you can more or less copy and paste into your solution and make that action happen. There's no coding skills more or less necessary, but it needs to be added in the places where it's needed. We also don't have pre-configured processes for all complex types of data. So something like sales orders, purchase orders, where you might want to create a purchase order in one company and send it out to another company, and there it becomes a sales order, and then when it goes back, it becomes a sales invoice. Some of these more complex processes where data is layered, we do not have this in the version 1. But over time, we will add more and more of these more common scenarios, and it will be based on the feedback we get from you as partners. What do you want the most? What are your requirements? Where do you see value adds? And so over time, we want to enable more of these pre-configured data sets and processes to be used out of the box. So again, we value any input. We really want this to be something that is not just a static product, but something that keeps getting better and better all the time for you.
Okay, you might have questions regarding pricing and contact rich. I mean, that's the best, and we have a discussion, and we are still, there are so many different scenarios there, and we are trying to find a business model that, you know, works for special retail companies with few users, many companies, or with progressors if we should bundle it, etc. So contact us, we have a discussion, and we find a solution, and our contact information you have there, and Rich, you know by heart his number, and Rich and myself, we are in contact more or less on daily basis. That's it. And Rich, you asked me to add this slide, you know, what's the benefits and who to benefit. I added it here for everyone to read afterwards and take inspiration from. And with that, end of this session, so I open up for questions.
So I've had a couple questions come in via chat. The first one was, will this PowerPoint, because there were lots of links and lots of things in a couple of slides, will this PowerPoint be available that partners can download, or can I have it and be able to shoot it out to partners?
Absolutely not. Of course. I will send it right away after this. When we hang up, I will send it directly to you.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned pricing. That was one of the early questions, so pricing is there. I will also throw a caveat out for pricing in that we have had everything from, and this has only been available for what, less than a month. So it's relatively new, and we've already had lots of quotes out. We've had a quote from like 20 users and 3 companies to 10 users and 160 companies. So there's a wide range, and that is why Stefan mentions that, you know, if you have a, let's call it that one-off scenario or that very unique customer, let's have the discussion. Let's make sure we find a way to make it work.
Yeah. So based on that, everyone understand that we cannot only base it on number of users, because the value is with the number of companies. But on the other hand, with progressors, it's also related to the number of users that, you know, potentially could pose time entries that needs to fly between the, not many, but few companies, etc. So finding a business model, let's discuss, and we just make sure that we can close the deal together. I believe the scenario we just looked at is very common, at least what we see in Europe. Especially these times when company acquire other companies, you know, building up a greater group, and the different companies still work as their own company, but at the same time they want the group to utilize from each other. So this kind of scenario, at least here in Europe, is extremely common. We also see that it's more and more that you want to make resources available for other companies to see their skills and qualifications, so they can be utilized not only within the company where they're working or hired, but cross companies. And from an employee perspective, that's quite nice because you really feel that you're part of a bigger group, an international group, and I'm visible out there. And if you have a nice profile, you will be asked to work in other projects international, for instance. So we see it more and more. We also see that for the mid-market business, there are not many solutions, if any, that can really support this in a nice way, especially not when we talk about the fully integrated solution. So we believe that we can find quite some nice business opportunities with this solution, intercompany solution for Progressus.
As we think about the competitors in the marketplace, can you talk about why this is the answer versus some of the, let's call it, more traditional competitors in the multi-entity space?
So I don't know all the multi-entity. So I know a few solutions available in Europe. They are typically, the traditional master data pushing from one company into other. The solutions we have seen in US are often more of a virtual company setup in one company. So what we have here, where we send any kind of data between any companies, and also an environment that's unique. What we do, I would say, I'm not saying anyone else being able to do this in the business center space. Now, for professional services, a project-based business scenario with resources working as, in joint projects, but still they're employed in their own company. None of the existing solutions as I know it can support this, and for sure not with Progressus. The competitors we see, I'm not sure I've seen any that can support it the way we can support it. So we have, here in Europe, we have a couple of clients, and they have typically entities in 4 or 5 different countries. For them, this is, that's the solution. If they don't want to have lots of manual work, because otherwise you need to, in a manual process, take out all the time entries, post them again in the other company, etc., etc. So this is a huge time and cost saver, and also enable them to invoice the end user very quickly once the time entries are approved.
And I wanted to highlight something that you mentioned, but I think we need to kind of pound it home, is as we talk about the availability of all of this with Progressus and BC, this is the only solution that will do intercompany time push back and forth with both Progressus and BC. So that's something critical that we need to point out.
And no one else is doing that. So this is where we have done some special things to make it work with Progressus, because that was our initial scope. We met bigger end users with multiple entities, in our case maybe different countries, etc., but it doesn't matter. So that's where it all started, and we realized that there are new solutions that could manage this, and that's the reason why we started with this intercompany solution.
I have a couple of questions that were asked of me by people that could not be here live. So one of the first questions that I was asked was, will this work for both the cloud version as well as the on-premise version of BC?
Yes. And yes.
Anything we need to think about as far as differences or special considerations?
Absolutely not. It should definitely work, and even within a hybrid of those. So again, we do work with multi-environment setups. So you could even have a setup where you have multiple environments on-prem communicating with each other, or some on-prem, some in the cloud, and communicating with each other as well. So there are no limitations in that regard.
But I did have one other question come in. I think you answered it earlier, but I think they may have jumped in late. So would you confirm that this does give us the ability to do multiple countries on multiple tenants.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's one of the real tricky scenarios otherwise. But because we do solve the problem with multiple environments, we also solve that because usually one country per environment would be the case. And with Microsoft having recently opened up for having multiple environments of Business Central to support multiple countries, this is absolutely one of the scenarios that we solve.
Thank you all for your attention. Aski, Stefan, thank you for the product, number one. Thank you for the training, number two, and for the documentation. That's probably as big as anything. Thank you for that, number three. Should any partners have any questions, you have my number, you have Stefan's number, you have our email addresses. Please let us know what we can do. We are convinced that this will be a game changer for practices that are pushing Dynamics 365 Business Central for professional services, because working between companies and between environments in countries have been things we've run into, and now we don't lose those deals. Now we have the product in the market. So we're pretty excited about that and looking forward to helping you close lots more Business Central with Progress's Advanced Project and Prime Intercompany